IMHO Talk Show. You have Search, y'all.
Miss Max.
Raisin.
A Braun.
And we are here as promised, and thank you all for staying tuned. Thank you all for listening. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we truly do appreciate that. See, like we always say, we bring the world to Seville and take Seville to the world. So make sure you stay tuned with us. IMHO Talk Show online, 434-422-9101 to hit us here at the station, because I believe that you do have questions or comments thus far. Mm-hmm. And if not, you will after this segment, because we have I think someone new to the realm of politics, Senate hopeful, local young man, Mr. Elliott Harding. Elliott, what's up, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reaching out to us. I don't know you yet, but when people come on this show, it's kind of like being at the Olive Garden, your family when you're here. And so
he's been waiting to use that avenue.
So thanks for reaching out. But I have been seeing online and things of that sort. You've been around the community. You know, had a couple of folks that I know, vouch for you and say, hey, man, y'all should talk to Elliott as well. Yeah. So appreciate you recognizing our platform and wanting to take your busy schedule and just allot a little time to us to speak to the airwaves.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Any opportunity I can to chat with people here in the area. I'm born and raised here in Charlottesville. Okay. I've lived here about 80% of the Senate district my entire life.
Okay.
And, y'all got a great platform. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And we are broadcast worldwide. More people stream than listen on the FM dial, I believe, for this show majority of the time. So in saying that, right here, someone could be voting for Elliott Harding for for a federal position sometime soon. Elliott, you never know.
I don't know about all that.
So, but you actually started where we want to start from. Just let the people know a little bit about your background, and what got you on this path.
Sure. So, my name's Elliott Harding. I'm running as an independent for state senate. It's a two-man race. I'm born and raised here in Charlottesville. Went to high school here. Went to UVA for undergrad. Went and got my law degree at Washington and Lee down in Lexington. That's where I met my wife, and worked in D.C. for a year after law school, but then came right back down here. She left Manhattan and came back down here, and we lived in Nelson for a little bit. And then we got married in April, bought our first house here in the city. So as far as the political stuff is concerned, I've been involved with some party stuff. I've been involved, worked in D.C. on the Hill, crafting legislation up there for a year. I've been active trying to get bills passed in the General Assembly, pushing local issues too. And I'm a defense attorney by trade, primarily criminal defense. I do some other work. I do some commercial litigation. I do some civil rights stuff, but generally it's mostly criminal defense. Do a lot of appeals too. And so those issues that I've seen that are a big reason why I'm running. When I got on the ballot, I was a little torn because it was a little late when they validated my signatures. You got to get your signatures to be able to run for office. And it took them a while to validate all my signatures. And by the time it got approved, I was thinking, is this something we want to do? Because it's such a quick race, and I'm running against somebody who's been in office for nearly 30 years. Yeah. Maybe I want to start a PAC and push for criminal justice reform. I'm kind of inspired by what Meek Mill's doing with the Reform Alliance out of Pennsylvania and Philly. And I was thinking, Virginia needs that. But at the end of the day, I thought, running for office is a lot better platform and being able to do it yourself rather than sitting around asking other people to make those changes. And that's where I come from.
So I guess my first question, based on your introduction, there is why independent?
Yeah, I was thinking.
I think that a lot of people are kind of over and getting tired of the party system as it is. I think a lot of people get let down on both parties. A lot of people say they're going to do one thing, or that the platform for the party is going to do one thing, but in reality, they're both being, in Virginia at least, they're both being controlled by the same donors. Dominion is the number one donor for both parties, and then the top 5 donors to both parties are the same. And so to me, I'm thinking as an independent, I can kind of cut through that noise a little bit, because once you go into a party label, you got to start answering for everybody else in the world. And it's like, I don't want to have to answer for what some Republicans doing or what some Democrats doing. I don't want to have to answer for other people other than, what I'm saying and what the issues are, on the ground here in the district.
Now, would you say if elected, you're going to have to make a choice?
I've been asked if I would caucus with any party or not. I will go as long as I can without having to do that. I don't need to be told what a particular bill is going to do. I've read bills, I've crafted bills. They're not that dense. I mean, there might be times where I need, to follow up with staff or people, but I don't like the idea of a caucus running my show. That's not what I'm about. And there will be times where there are issues that are very bipartisan. And there'll be times that one party think I'm going to do one thing, but I might not, depending, because it's all about my principles. At the end of the day, I want the government to kind of send the power back down locally, empower individuals. I think Richmond has gotten too expansive and too involved in too many things. And so ultimately, my guiding principle is how can we kind of liberate the system a little bit more.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
All right. Now, I understand what you're saying about, being an independent, but from the background that you read off, it seems like you're going to find most of your support coming from the Republican side of things.
Probably, just because I'm running against a Democrat.
Right. So that by default, they're going to push you over to that side. How difficult?
You mean when I'm in office?
Yeah, once you're in office. Let's be honest. Money kind of controls things, and if the top five are feeding both sides, if we remember correctly, and this is not to compare you to anybody, but the first time that I heard somebody make that kind of statement was Donald Trump. He said, "Look, I give money to everybody." Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And that's because you have. I want to support whoever wins.
Right.
So, not judging any way that you're saying it one way or another, but if it comes time to where you have to choose a side.
I would probably, if I had to choose between the two, I don't like the trajectory of where some of the Democratic Party's going on some issues. Okay. But then again, I'm the first one to call out Republicans for being hypocrites too. So if I have to join a side, it's gonna be it'll be a little bit of a thorn in their side. If one of those teams wants me, and I have to pick one, we'll see where the dust settles. But they're not going to be thrilled about it because I'm going to do my best to raise a little bit of hell for both sides.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Aaron. I actually have a real name. Hey, I want to actually go back to something you mentioned earlier about your career as an attorney. I saw the Meek Mill documentary. It was really, really good. I'd suggest that people watch it. But one of the things that I could not get over was Meek Mill, and I'm sure everybody's aware that he was on probation for an obscene amount of time.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found so interesting is that Meek Mill is backed by, he had the machine of Jay-Z and Rock Nation as a management company backing him with resources. And the whole time I'm watching it, and I'm speaking from personal experiences, I said, there's millions of young black males that get caught up in the system, and they do not have that kind of money.
Yeah.
From your attorney standpoint, what are some things that we can do to help prevent this sentence? Because Meek Mill's story is wonderful, but for every one Meek Mill, you got 500,000 brothers that are not even going to be able to get near somebody actually putting. And I want to put this in perspective. Meek had private investigators, attorney, a whole team of people just so he can get off of probation. Think about the people that are locked up right now that don't even have access to those resources. Appeal. We'll get to your case later. Talk about that from your attorney standpoint and some of the changes you think we need to make from a legal standpoint.
So I think it's the most broken system in all of government. I think it's the biggest issue that facing us as a country domestically is how overbearing the system is, and how what I've told people is everyone who's touched by the criminal justice system, not just the defendants, but the mothers of the defendants or the children of the defendants or anybody, right? Anybody who's touched by the system, they lose a little bit more of a voice in ever making changes, right? So whether they're cash strapped, their anxiety, they might get a felony on their record, they might not be able to vote. All these things, they start crippling communities, and it's been going on for decades and decades. The changes I would like to see, we could talk the entire time as far as soup to nuts as far as like major reforms and minimum and minor reforms that have a big impact. So something as small as, I think you should have an automatic expungement if you're found not guilty. I don't know why it's on your criminal record or why there's an arrest record of you getting pulled into court when it was found that it was not guilty. You know, that seems minor.
Yeah, but they won't do it, right?
But you shouldn't have to answer yes. Have you ever been arrested on a thing if you were found not guilty? The system said it shouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? So that's something small. But then, you know, I want to see mandatory minimums taken away. I want to see alternative sentencing. I want to see job skills put in for people that are about to do reentry. You know, 95% of people are going to leave prison someday. Why aren't we putting them in a better position to not, have recidivism? You know, help them find jobs, help job placement, get them skills if they don't have the skills. I think that if you're a nonviolent criminal, there are alternatives to incarceration that can be more positive, things that can also keep you in touch with your family. I mean, we're breaking up homes when you take a mother or a father out and you ruin the nuclear family, and next thing you know, they don't ever get to see, you know, their parent. And it's like, why don't we have some home incarceration or halfway systems so that the parents can be back in the community?
Now, let me, not to cut you off or anything, that all sounds good.
Right.
But if you take on the Republican side of things, it's not profitable to take the viewpoint of what you said. So then you have a whole party staring you in your face. Now, because the reason that I'm bringing it up is because a lot of times politicians, you know, they have the best of intentions. This is what I would like to see happen.
Yeah.
But we do understand that it is a machine that operates. So in the event that you're not able to stand on what you want to stand on personally, how would you suggest that your constituents come and approach you about the things that you said you wanted to do, but you may not be able to do because of the machine or where you're at? A lot of people don't understand that that's a real thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a real thing in the sense that you're just one of, there are 40 senators, and there's 100 members in the House, one of 140, and then you still need to have a governor that's going to sign it, you know. So it takes a lot. But, you know, if I'm up there and somehow I don't use my voice and my platform, then people should give me flack for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you also got to recognize credit if you are speaking up and pounding your fist on these issues and doing my best to advance the ball, you know, down the field as far as making real reforms. But, you know, it's not going to be done in a day, you know. And so to your point, I think there's got to be somewhat of a realistic expectation as far as how much change can be made at one time. But the day I quit talking about the issues, that's when I should get heat. People should say, you said you were going to do this, and now you're not even talking about it. That's a big issue, right? At least push it, talk about it, introduce the legislation, you know, raise the profile of the issues, bring in people that have personal stories, highlight those stories, humanize the issues in a way that really advances the cause. But I'll tell you, you know, you're talking about the Republicans and the Democrat and party stuff. I've seen the inside of how the party systems work, and there are certain ways to leverage party knowledge in a way that threatens other legislators to where they know they gotta do what it is they're saying that they're gonna do. And I have no problem standing up in the middle of a thing saying, y'all say you're for limited government, but we arrested 29,000 people last year for marijuana. We spent $63 million on marijuana arrests last year, and I'm thinking Colorado just made $220 million in revenue.
That's right.
That's $280 million swing, and you want to be the fiscally responsible party for small government? I'll raise that. I'll put that mirror in front of the Republicans' face if I have to.
That.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And so maybe I don't legalize it in a year, but I'll at least beat the drum.
So, there you go. And just minor question. I'm just wondering if there are others that you know who already hold seats that you know you may be able to align with in order to get this type of legislation.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are, and they're on both parties. I think by me being in there, especially as an independent, I kind of can provide I guess space for these people to finally stand up on their own 2 feet and advocate for these issues. A lot of the times people get pulled, like you were saying earlier, by the partisan direction. You know, they'll have the people at the top of the party being like, look, we don't really want to address that issue this year, so you're not going to introduce that bill. But if I'm there, I can be kind of a sounding board where it's like, you have support now, meaning there will be other people across both parties aligning on particular issues. And that's the thing is, right now, through the political experience, so many people get distracted on emotional issues, right? I mean, some of the things that are on Twitter and the news, and it's like, yeah, that's, it's really emotional and energized, but none of that is substantive policy work that ever makes its way to the floor. It's all distraction.
All right.
Distraction.
And with that said, Elliott, we're going to take a quick break. You're tuned into In My Humble Opinion. You're listening to a conversation with Senate hopeful Elliott Harding. We'll be right back.
We are back, IMHO, and we are still here with Senate hopeful Mr. Elliott Harding. Elliott, thanks once again for joining IMHO family here today.
Thanks for having me.
You know it. And like I said, IMHO Talk Show up here at the station, 434-422-9101. So, Elliott, let's go ahead and jump into your platform. The things that people, when they're considering where they're going to cast their ballot, like what are the top issues that should pop in their head when they think of Elliott Harding?
So, we touched on criminal justice reform. That's my number one thing, but also the schools, education system, I think is pretty broken. There's a lot of things that go into that. Like I was saying, I was born and raised here in the area. My mom, she's a teacher. My grandmother used to be a teacher. My mom used to be vice principal over at Greer and at Meriwether Lewis, so very different schools. She taught at Albemarle. She ran the aftercare programs in Albemarle for a while. So I saw a lot of different things in the education system, but she pulled me out of some of the local public schools when the SOLs were introduced, because she thought standardized testing was going to end up being a downfall for public education. And I think over time the SOLs have led to a form of curriculum that discourages critical thinking, and so it's become very fact-based, and I think the quality of education suffers due to that. So that's something I'd like to see changed a little bit. I also think that people should have more choices.
So you're talking about, when you say SOL testing, is that to say you would vote to change the type of test, or you would eliminate SOLs? What does that mean?
I mean, eliminating them is a bold move that probably ain't going to get done, but there's probably a way to more regionally or localize the curriculum and allow people to kind of set their own standards, more relative, rather than having Richmond dictated at all times. And then the types of testing that's done isn't really indicative of your knowledge and your ability to learn. It's more indicative, do you know a bunch of facts, which, anybody can go memorize a bunch of facts, but that's not what the purpose of education is. It's supposed to have you learn how to learn. How do you solve this problem? So I'd also like to see skills put back into schools a little bit more, as far as a focus on that. I think we live in a world where, if you have to graduate with a language, which is helpful, don't get me wrong, but I don't go speak foreign languages every day. It's helpful. But, if you have to graduate with that, and you have to graduate with being in the band or art or some type of artistic stuff, why should you not also have to have at least a Class C level of one skill? Something. It could be electric, it could be plumbing, it could be HVAC, it could be coding, it could be cooking, it could be IT, whatever. But the fact is it can't hurt anybody to come out with something like that, and we as a society would know, even if you can't read that well, we know you're going to have a career and you're going to be able to pay the bills. And that's something that I think we have shifted away from. We tell everybody, you got to go to college, which, don't get me wrong, college is helpful. I've benefited by going to college. But we've stigmatized the idea of skills, and people can make a lot of money doing it.
Why do you think that is? Honestly.
Why do I think we've shifted?
Yeah, why do you think that we got away from it? I know why I think, but I'm anxious to see, why do you think?
I think there are a few reasons. I think for a long time, college was something that only people with money could do, and then it was viewed as something that everybody should do, meaning it was looked at like, they've got something I want, therefore we all should go to college. And it's like, well, yeah, it's helpful, don't get me wrong, but when we shift people out of entire labor sectors where they could be walking out of high school making $85,000 a year.
And that's why I think the problem is, me personally, because the trade schools were heavily dominated by the African American community. And I think, me personally, in my humble opinion, I think it was pulled away from so that they could be controlled. Because nobody can tell you how much wire to pull, how many cars to wash, or how many buildings to build. But they can tell you if you're living in an apartment, you can't put your house up to go to college. So I think it was a systematic thing that was done. And while you are lobbying for that, I think that you'll meet opposition from the gates of hell.
Probably.
If you try to empower people from a lower community to get them to where they can financially be independent.
Yeah, I mean, I probably will catch hell for that. I'll also note the thing about the schools. You were talking about kind of the system and how it's broken and meant to kind of disenfranchise in a certain way. If you look at the real estate-based property taxes and the way that they're funding of schools, you know, the schools are funded through your real estate taxes primarily, and they dictate where you go based on where you're living. And that has a really bad history on race. I mean, obviously you had segregated schools up until the 50s, 60s, you know, and then we had busing. But now we've got a system where the rich move to the rich areas and they have the better schools. Meanwhile, we have, you know, you had redlining and zoning stuff, and then you had the government housing component where they're all in one area. And so the schools are disproportionately impacted based on the real estate taxes and the value of property. You shouldn't be dictated where you go just based on your zip code or something like that. I think there should be a little bit more autonomy in a parent's ability to choose a school for their kids. We don't have a lot of charter schools in Virginia. There's a system reason for that, and I would like to change that so that there can be more charters if localities want them. You know, look at D.C. and how many people want to go to the charter schools up there.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's not against public or private. It's not about religious schools. It's just at the end of the day, I think, you know, a curriculum should fit the child's needs. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And Elliott, can we hold you for a few more minutes?
Oh yeah.
Are you
absolutely.
good? We're not gonna make you late for anything.
No, we're good.
All right. So we gotta take a quick break, and y'all, IMHO family, you have an exclusive. We are here with Senate hopeful Elliott Harding. IMHO Talk Show here at the station. We are in studios 434-422-9101 with none other than Mr. Elliott Harding, Senate hopeful for the 25th district, right? Yeah. So Elliott, so where we left off, I know Aaron had a question, wanted to elaborate on something. Go ahead, Aaron.
Sure. So Max and I were sitting here talking, and a lot of times we do have the opportunity to talk to a lot of professional politicians that come up here. But I'm really interested in your career as an attorney. And what we were discussing is that it's real easy to kind of reference, you know, Meek Mill and the criminal justice reform. But what I wanted to ask you was, going to law school does not give you the experience of once you start to get into the courtrooms and get into the systems and you see really what's going on and some of the injustices. And I know you said this is the most broken thing. Was there one thing in particular, one particular case or things you saw from your colleagues or even in your own career that made you say, not the Meek Mill situation, but for yourself personally, that made you say, wow, this thing is even worse than what I thought it was?
Yeah, I mean, my second week of law school, my father got arrested and ultimately served like 3.5 years in federal prison while I was in law school. Okay. And so during that process, I mean, they didn't let him out for 6 months in pretrial detention over at CVRJ in Orange County, which is not a good regional jail. It's not a good spot. And so, you know, through that, you live it, you know, you see a lot. And then the real thing for me, I mean, we were able to ultimately fight it out and got a relatively good outcome of what it could have been and stuff like that. But when we would drive down...
Wait a minute, you say they gave him 3 years or he served 3 years?
He served, well, it was in federal, so, I mean, he served 6 months in pretrial, which got counted, and then he served probably another 3 years down in Petersburg.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I would go down there, you know, and you were asking, look, the real situation is when you go in a waiting room at a federal camp like that and you see a 300-to-1 black to white ratio and you see little 2-year-old babies crying because they're about to be leaving dad or mom or whoever and they're not going to see them for another 6 months because they got to drive. You don't unsee that. So at that point, you gotta keep fighting on the system. I mean, I didn't go to law school to want to do criminal defense. I thought I was gonna be doing like real estate or something, you know. But then once you see it, it's like, well, you gotta fight it, because otherwise it's gonna only be worse if someone's not dedicating their time to try to change it.
A lot of times that comes along when it affects you.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we, because like there's conversations that, you know, African Americans have amongst ourselves that we don't have around other people. And we notice that a lot of times when we do have other counterparts, Caucasian people, in different races, that say, man, look, this ain't right. When you start talking, you find out that something hit home on them, you know, so.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be like one of those things where my personal experience, you know, is more important than anybody else's, but you know, some people feel this way about healthcare because maybe somebody got sick in their family, or some people feel this way about education because, you know, they had a positive or a negative experience, or, you know, maybe they feel this way about, you know, pick the issue area, right? But for I think the criminal justice system is one that doesn't get talked about. I mean, it is now. It's picking up now, I'd say, in the last 2 years. But it's fundamentally flawed in a lot of ways, whether it's one of those things that I could spend the rest of my life trying to make the changes that I think need to be made and still probably not be able to do it.
Got a question for you, Elliott. Just want to talk to you a little bit about guns. Just reading an article here from the Conservative Virginian. It talks about you working to challenge the age restriction that makes it unlawful to for federal arms dealers to sell to those within the age range of 18 and 21. So just wanted to know your plans there.
So, yeah, it's a lawsuit that we have right now in federal court. Federal law prevents federally licensed firearm dealers from selling handguns to people under the age of 21, but someone under the age of 21 is still allowed to purchase handguns privately without background checks. You know what I mean? So FFLs require background checks, right? You know, they got to go through the traditional process. A 19-year-old can buy a higher powered firearm from an FFL. So they can buy shotguns, they can buy rifles, you know, they can buy all that, but they can't buy a pistol, which is the thing that's most used in self-defense. Meanwhile, they can still own a pistol. They can buy it from a private dealer, a private transaction, without any checks. So for us, we saw it as I've got a case. I mean, every case needs a client. She's a 19-year-old girl from Albemarle. She works on a horse farm out in rural county, and she had an ex-boyfriend with a protective order who abused her. He was picked up with guns with the PO, wasn't supposed to have those, didn't show up to court. So she's got a former abuser out there with firearms, and she can't go in and buy a new one herself and carry it. So we talked about it, and at the end of the day, we were like, well, this doesn't make any sense. The fact that she can go buy stronger weapons or buy that same gun without a background check is dumb. She should be able to go into an FFL, go through the traditional process, and purchase that firearm. So that's our case. That's our claim to it. I'm generally pro Second Amendment. I'm pro all the amendments. I mean, I'm a pretty strong civil rights guy.
Now, I know that response may rub some people wrong with all the gun violence that is happening. You know, you hear about it, churches, concerts, on our streets. What's your response there?
Well,
people who want stricter gun laws.
I would note that most killings happen in areas with gun bans. So you look at Chicago, right? They have some of the strict, LA, some of these areas have some of the strictest firearm laws in the country, yet their violence rates are through the roof. Every time you remove firearms, you empower the cops or criminals. And I don't think that somebody should have to wait 10 minutes for the cops to arrive if their house is getting broken into. You know, I think it's an easy way out to blame the firearms for a larger systematic cultural breakdown that we've been having. I think there's a lot of things, whether it be mental health, whether it be poverty and crime. Violent crime comes from a lot of different things. These mass shootings is a different issue than day-to-day gun violence. Those are different issues, and you know, you hear these things like banning semi-automatics. That's most firearms are semi-automatics, you know, or they want to reduce the magazine down by like 8 bullets. It's like, okay, at a certain point,
you know.
Yeah.
Either you're a good shot or you're not.
Yeah, you stupid. Hey, one of the things that I find the most appalling about, I believe in the right to bear arms, but the problem is the system is set to give African American men a felony by the time that they're 21.
Yep.
So now you're saying introduce more guns into the system, but we're gonna take away these people's right to have a gun. So now that's a problem for African Americans. Like, there's more guns out here, but I'm not allowed to own it unless I'm going to the penitentiary if I get caught.
Right.
But nobody's talking about that, nobody's talking about that.
Well, it goes to that larger point. People want to stigmatize the idea of gun ownership, so no one's going to advocate for the idea of loosening access to them. And people are like, oh, well, you're a felon, then you should know. And I'm like, well, were they a violent felon? Or,
So what would you do? Let's get the rubber to the road. What would you do?
It's primarily a federal issue, unfortunately. So the state...
That's not what I asked you.
Oh, well, I'd sound the alarm. I'd continue to make it so you can have an easier petition to get your firearms back.
Okay.
The fact that you got to go and pay an attorney like me, I do these cases where I got to go petition the court to get your firearms back. I'm thinking to myself, if you're in good standing character and you don't have a violent crime and you're still a felon, it should be relatively easy to get your firearm rights back. As long as you're not violent,
Now, speaking of that, perfect transition into the mental health forum as well, and any changes you'd like to see in that. Because the gentleman that you're running against, a lot of folks know him. Candid. Some people know him from being a Democratic presidential candidate several years ago, and some people know him from the mental health debate. For those that don't know, he had a son who had severe mental health issues who ended up and tried to kill him and then committed suicide. So this is a gentleman that you're running against. So this is this could be a very mucky conversation.
Sure, yeah.
So when you look at whether people with mental disabilities, as far as their services, their right to bear arms,
right.
Where do you stand with that mental health debate as well as it associates to their rights?
Well, I'll to the larger point, as far as the mental health system, I used to be on the Region 10 Community Services Board. All right, so I did that for about 2 years, and then of course with my job as a defense attorney, I see mental health crosses into the criminal sector a lot due to improper services, never being diagnosed, things like that, right? And you're not going to lose an advocate on the issue of mental health reform. Just, if we replace the state center, I'm going to be an advocate. It's a very flawed system right now. There aren't enough beds in the mental health system as far as people needing, when they get emergency issues like that. They have bad transportation problems right now, where officers have to go and sit and wait for 8 hours per person they're taken in for one of these temporary detention orders, and that needs to be reformed in a way that we're not taking officers off the street to just go sit there and effectively babysit for 8 hours, when in reality we can change that. I think that we should have more mental health in the schools. One thing, nobody bats a lash when you say every school has a school nurse, but it's like 1 for every 3,000 kids for mental health. It's one of those things. It's like people need to quit stigmatizing the system. You should, if you got issues, if you got anxiety, if you got depression, you should be able to have an outlet early in life so that people know that's normal to go see somebody. If you've got a bad back or a bad knee, it's normal to go see the doctor, and nobody judges that. But kids, it's like stigmatized, where people aren't seeing therapy if they need therapists, or they're not getting diagnosed if they've got a borderline personality disorder or something like that. I do think we overprescribe though too. I think right now we're pushing pills onto kids too early, and that's I think that actually might be a larger issue that nobody's looking into. I think the pharmaceuticals you talk about the big money interests. I mean, the pharmaceuticals are one of the most influential industries in the country, and I think that they might be leading to a little bit more problems sometimes than we care to say. So that's another thing. You ask, what can we do about it? There are a lot of things at the state level we can start to do, particularly as far as research and making sure that we're not over-prescribing people. That's a big thing.
Gotcha. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with Senate hopeful Elliott Harding. So y'all make sure that y'all stay tuned, because we're going to be right back with him. and right here on IMHO. And so if you can join it just for, it won't take you much longer, but we'll come back and we'll try to close out with you. Very interesting conversation, and I think the folks appreciate it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
As promised, we are still here in our final part of this interview with Mr. Elliott Harding, and I want to thank him again for staying tuned, sticking with us here. And for you all, hopefully you find it very informative conversation, very enlightening, as well as entertainment. You know how we do here at IMHO. So just want to make sure we look across the table to make sure that everybody kind of spoke their part. If there's anything that we wanted to ask, and any of the listeners, if you have any Q&A, please don't forget to hit us up. All right, but Elliott, I know one thing that I wanted to touch on too, real quick, was from what I saw, one of the first things that pops up when and it's for better or for worse, you tell me, is your endorsement of Nick Freitas, who was representing the Culpeper area. Now, I don't live there, but I some of my associates and colleagues didn't think too fondly of him. He seemed he had a reputation of being pretty staunch conservative. So when a voter looks up that, I mean, I don't know if you want to delve into that as far as explaining it.
Well,
but,
sure, no.
But when a voter sees that connection and sees some of his votes, can they expect sort of the same line?
Here's the deal. Nick is the most. It's all relative, okay? And Nick's probably the most libertarian member of the General Assembly as far as the Republicans go. Now, he considers himself more of a conservative than a libertarian, but he's the type of guy that would vote to legalize marijuana if the vote was allowed. He's the type of guy that wants to end civil asset forfeiture, with people getting their money taken without them even being charged with a crime. So as far as the issue area, he branches out a little bit better than people think. Like he carried Sally Hudson's ranked choice voting legislation down in the General Assembly. So there are a lot of things that overlap in non-traditional ways than people think. He was also running against Corey Stewart for the Republican nomination, and I literally wanted to do everything in my power to make sure Corey Stewart wasn't the nominee, because I mean, it just raises my blood pressure talking about the guy, in this area too. And people can disagree with Nick, but he's a respectable guy. I mean, he was a Green Beret, good family man. Like, he works hard and he tells you what he's going to do. He's not going to lie about his record and what he stands for. And so I wanted to do everything I could to have somebody like that be the nominee rather than having to deal with whatever Corey brought to the table. So that's and plus he's a nice guy. We get along, and that's another thing. I've got friends that on both sides of the political spectrum. Republicans and Democrats. I mean, people should go look at when I was getting signatures to run for office. There are a lot of elected officials or former elected officials who are Democrats that signed so that I could be able to run. I've got ties to both parties. So and I know we're running short on time, so maybe a little rapid fire, but abortion, do you vote to keep it legal, or should abortion be illegal? I mean, abortion, as far as right, abortion should not be illegal in the sense that, that's that's just not going to happen. That's just an impractical view of the world.
But as far as being a woman's
I think the bigger issue is even the pro-life people need. First of all, I don't like what Northam and Kathy Tran were trying to do in this past session, talking about some longer, like third term type stuff. A little late in the development game, I think, for that to be a discussion. But I also think that even the pro-life people need to step up and talk about things like making contraceptives more accessible. The pill's not over the counter. I don't understand that. I mean, it should be something that's easier, because if you want to prevent unplanned pregnancies, both parties should be fighting for that. I mean, you know what I mean? But I think abortion generally is something that should not be. It's a sad experience. People that have to go through those typically have had sad experiences sometimes.
And your thoughts on immigration? A lot of kids being ripped away from their families.
I'm sorry, before you jump to that, though, I don't think we got an answer, though. But as far as if the vote came to you
to ban abortion,
of it being like a woman's right, or if the state should decide, that's more of the question. Like, whose right is it to choose whether a woman gets an abortion?
At the end of the day, the Supreme Court has spoken on the issue. You know, I mean, Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood against Casey, like, it's not going to get taken away. I wouldn't. But I also think that at a certain, I mean, it's a little life too. You know, I mean, and so at a certain point, the state, it's not the state making a choice, it's the state protecting future life. I mean, that's the way it's viewed. That's what Roe v. Wade said. At a certain point in development, if the child is viable,
so a certain term, it's no longer okay.
Do you have kids? Just out of curiosity.
I do not. We do not have kids yet. But you were talking about immigration. So, I mean, I'm pro-immigration, you know. I do think we have a border problem. I do think that there are a lot of people present here in the United States illegally, and illegal immigration disproportionately impacts the poor and minority communities because money is a marginal asset. And so when you're filling the schools or talking about jails and access to resources, the fact that we have a public defender that is solely there for the undocumented population, I'm thinking to myself, what about all the citizens that aren't getting their access to adequate court, you know, representation, or the hospitals are full, the schools become full. You know, it's a resource issue. It's not meant to be inhumane. It's not. I don't like that. I don't like.
It's not meant to be, but a lot of ways that's the way it's rolling out.
Absolutely, I don't like the kids in cages stuff. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of parents and children being split up. You know. That's not what I'm about, but I also think that, you know, I think that we should fix a broken system. That's again, all of this is all national issues. Like the state senator can't really do that, fix it. Unfortunately, I wish we could, but we can't. I think that we should have more migrant visas. You know, that's a big thing. The farming community needs labor, you know, the service industry, all these things are good and positive, and a lot of these people coming in with great values and great perspective, and they add to a cultural identity, and they got strong family ties, and they're good people, and they want to work hard. I'm very pro that, you know, the access to the American dream is awesome. I think you got to do it within the system. Otherwise, you're kind of flouting the law, and at that point, you start disrespecting the citizenship that you're trying to join. I think.
So is it about not having so many people come across the border, or is it just for them to be here, there needs to be an easier process for them to be citizens? Because I kind of heard you saying two different things. Like, one, it may be too many coming now.
We got too many people coming illegally.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Like, so should the legalization be easier, or is it?
I think that there should be a faster, more efficient method of, if you want to become a citizen and if you want to work here, there should be a faster, easier method to get a visa. But you know that we have an illegal immigration problem. We don't have an immigration problem.
Do we feel the same way when it comes to, like, say, people from Russia? Or people from Switzerland? Because, like, an immigrant is an immigrant. Right. It doesn't have to be across from Mexico. Right. But a lot of times when the media gets hold of it, that's how it's viewed.
Right.
So when we talk about it, do we talk about people that live in places where they may look more like you than more than Hispanic? Do we still consider that immigration law to be set in stone the same way?
We should.
But how would you vote then? Do you look at it that way too?
I mean, it should be colorblind as far as that stuff's concerned. I think the real reason people talk about Mexico is because it's the border state, and a very high percentage of people that are here illegally are from Latin America.
Yeah, but when you say border state, where the ocean butts up against America, if you fly a plane code, that's still the border.
Right, but it's hard to come into the U.S. illegally over the planes. Like
most of them coming through planes. There are people that go through the tunnels and everything, but when you look at it, like, I don't think we use that people of color thing when it comes to, like, immigration and border patrol. But when somebody comes from England, it's still, or Canada, I don't see it's being pushed like there's a difference, and there is no difference to me.
Right, I agree. Right. I think we're in agreement on that. Okay. I don't think there should be a difference.
Yeah, but I think if we start putting people from England in cages and separating kids, we're going to have a whole nother conversation going on here.
Yeah.
I just feel like that part always gets glossed over, the inhumane way that we're treating these immigrant families. I mean, even just now I've kind of felt like, okay, come and work, but, and I just felt like it was glossed over. Like it's dismissive to me. I don't know.
Yeah, Canada is a huge problem too, but you're right. Like nobody talks about a wall up at Canada, But the last thing I definitely want to touch on, because we have folks in the rural areas as well. Rural broadband.
Yeah.
Please tell me what you can do for us folks that live in Madison County, Greene County, Albemarle County.
I mean, for a long time, people were hesitant to really get the government involved in it because of traditional market growth. But at a certain point, it's like roads. You got to build them, right? So we got to just raise the money to build them. And I don't want to do it in a way. I think there's a lot of things that we can add to our revenue without having to increase taxes. But for example, we're talking about cannabis legalization. That's a $250 million change. If you that could pay for rural broadband very quickly. You know what I mean? So I think the state needs to be granting areas so that it's covered, and it becomes it's an access to opportunity. It's an equity issue. When a parent has to go sit in the parking lot at McDonald's so their kid can do their homework to hook up to the Wi-Fi. That's a real burden.
Yeah. And to me, that would be common sense, but folks voted. I know there was a federal grant on the table. Some of the counties went against it, and some of their reasons was, well, we want to protect, sort of the, like our rural environment. We don't want them, we don't want them messing up our landscape. So there's people who come up with a lot of reasons to not
and those are
expand.
Bogus reasons because, fiber gets laid, it's gone. You don't even know it's there. So, I don't know. I think it has to be built. I think that's a very big issue.
Nice.
No.
All right.
I'm good.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for stopping by.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank y'all for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime. So just the website, how to reach you if anybody wants to learn more about you. Reach out.
So our site is Harding4VA, FORVA.com. We're on Twitter. It's Harding4VA. We're on Facebook at Harding for State Senate. We have events here all the time. We had a meet and greet last week in town. We're going to have more stuff in town. We're going to probably do tailgate for the UVA games, the type of thing, kind of get the community out there. So follow us on all the social media, and maybe we'll have forums down the road. We definitely going to have some debates coming up. I challenged my opponent to 6 debates in all 6 counties. Said if he doesn't want to do it, we're going to turn it into a town hall, one way or the other. And we would love to, or I would love to, have various media platforms doing forums and things like that too. So stay in touch.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.